This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring, ring, ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey man, I watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original 1974 version, last night. I'm working my way through my October slate of watching a horror film every day, and this year I've included a few movies that I've seen in the past, but for one reason or another I felt needed to be revisited. This film, I remember, I'm not sure if it was part of the Video Nasties or not, but when the Video Nasties got freed up or released or whatever, again in, I guess, the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, late 90s, there was this then kind of groundswell of reappreciation of some of the grittier, uglier, more risque horror films of the 70s and 80s. And I do remember Texas Chainsaw Massacre being talked about a lot. Now, it's always been talked about a lot. It's such an iconic movie, but I think because there was a moment of like, let's watch and appreciate the most extreme horror films from the 70s and 80s, that there was more of a emphasis on Texas Chainsaw. So throughout my, what age would I have been? Sort of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, that kind of span. I was hearing about it, and it was, obviously the title alone, which is one of the best titles in film history, the title alone is scary and is very evocative and makes you go, Jesus Christ, I don't think I could watch that movie. I don't think I could handle that movie. It's one of the scariest just names of the movie ever made. And I think when I got to it then, I guess I was probably like 14, 15. Maybe just the fact that it'd been built up so much in my head, combined with how dated it was. Like, I was too young to have an appreciation for older movies. It's like kind of, you show a 14-year-old a black and white movie and they're like, what the fuck is this? You show that same person when they're 30, that same black and white movie, and they're like, I can totally appreciate this for what it is. And I think I probably saw it at a wrong age, so it wasn't that effective for me. And ever since then, I've always heard people talking about it. Like, I'm a big horror fan. It typically places in the sort of top 3 best horror films ever made when you see lists of the best horror films of all time. It's hugely influential on so many of the films that I love. Like, a director will come out with a movie, I'll love the movie, I'll start reading interviews and listening to interviews from the director, and they're citing Texas Chainsaw. I think also, like, a lot of horror directors have it as their favorite horror film, forgetting about like influence on a specific movie of theirs. So just hearing it over and over again has built up this curiosity for me of like, I need to go back to that movie. I need to watch it again and kind of see if I appreciate it more. And that's really the main reason I rewatch movies. I'm not a big film rewatcher. I'm not the type to like see a movie, think it's amazing, and then just watch it over and over again. I think there's value in doing that because I think you get more out of the movie on repeat viewings, but I just am inclined to do that. I'm more of a one and done type of guy, except for It's a Wonderful Life, which I watch every year. But and kind of, I guess, films associated with a season like Halloween, like Elf, things that have there's almost like a tradition as a society to revisit those films, and you feel like you're part of a bigger thing watching them. But for the most part, I don't rewatch movies. Anyway, decided to give this one a go. My mother's visiting at the moment, so I started watching it last night with my wife and my mother, and very quickly, in the opening scene of the hitchhiker cutting the Franklin's arm, it was clearly way too intense for my mother to watch. She was just like, it was not good. She couldn't handle it at all. I can't be scared really with other people around. And I was sort of sat behind them. So I'm like watching a sort of Mystery Science Theater 3000 version of the movie where I've got their two heads silhouetted watching the movie, and I'm kind of watching them watch it and all that. And so I was like, you know what? Let's stop this here, because I don't want to traumatize you. Like, my mum would be having nightmares and stuff. So I set her up with a different movie downstairs, took the laptop up to bed. Obviously, every movie you should watch it on the biggest screen possible. But, I thought, okay, needs must, I'll watch it on my laptop upstairs in bed. And my wife didn't want to watch it. So I was watching it, pitch black, kind of locked in on my own. And I had a phenomenal time with the movie. I found it scary. I can't believe that a 1974 movie is scary. I think the only other film older than this that I legitimately find scary is certain moments in Psycho. The bit in Psycho where it's an overhead shot with the staircase and the detective guy or cop, whatever he is coming up the staircase, and the killer just like walks out all of a sudden. That moment is so similar to the scares in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's almost like jump scare, but it really is the threat. So not jump scare of like, there's a loud noise and it turns out it's just a cat, but it's the same energy of a jump scare, but it is actually the killer emerging. And over the years, we've shifted over to that kind of Wes Craven model of, where you've got to have them moving around for ages really slowly, and you can see the killer in the background, and it's just like teasing out the tension gradually over time. But seeing this movie last night and then thinking back on Psycho and thinking like, these are really the only scares that actually do it for me from this old or older. And I adore many horror films from the 30s, the 40s, even the 20s. Like, I'm not saying there's no reason for me to watch those horror films, but I'm not scared by them. This film, I think, is still legitimately scary. And it does make me wonder, like, have we lost that way of constructing fears? Like, for example, the scene where the main character, well, the final girl and her brother Franklin, I can remember his name, I can't remember her name for some reason. They finally decide to like stop beeping the horn, to stop waiting for everyone to come back, and to head off. Pushing a wheelchair through like a little country bumpy path in the middle of the night, pitch black, and he goes like, "Wait, hold on a second. I think I hear something," and then just bam, Leatherface comes out, fully lit, just smashes. I can't remember what implement he has at that point, but like, they don't fuck around. Like, if Leatherface is going to get you, we won't see him on screen until like about a second until it's too late. There's no, and we do get chase scenes later, but so many times it's just like, you're just, you don't even know there's a threat, and then you're dead. Which it's weird for me that how effective that is, because the alternatives to that, where like you're getting increasingly scared, you're having to go deeper into the situation, there's more and more red flags, like Barbarian recently did this great in the first third of that movie. I love that. In fact, I value that higher than anything else in horror. So to see something that kind of goes against that and to find it so effective is really interesting. And it makes me want to kind of scratch my head and try and think, have I seen other horror films that do that as well, and don't just leave me going, oh, come on, why didn't you tease it out a bit more? But yeah, this film is so brutal. It goes so hard. Like, the opening and closing of that metal door and just like grabbing people. The fact that Leatherface isn't interested in like toying with people or scaring them or anything, just how just animalistically he's dealing with his targets and how little time this film spends creating completely manufactured situations just to draw things out. Like we accept so many things in horror now where someone does something and you're like, you wouldn't do that. You would make a beeline for safety right now, but you're doing it so that the movie can do its thing, right? This film is just like, no, they're out at their grandparents' house or whatever. They want to go swimming, so they go try and find a thing. They then notice another house. It's got a generator. It's all like really logical stuff. The film doesn't ask anything of you. It's so believable. And obviously it's shot in a kind of, it's not documentary style because there's very stylish shots here and there throughout the film, but it's shot in a gritty way that makes it feel even more like this is really those kids out there, right? And then when they get to the house, you know, they want to know, is there a generator so they can go in? And just like, I don't know, the instant brutality of the way that they're dealt with is amazing. I also love how there's just barely any gore in this movie. The bloodiest stuff we see is like the meat hanging up in the being barbecued or whatever, but we don't see the spikes going into that girl's back. We don't really see much in the way of like heads being smashed in. I don't know if there's a limitation of the budget. They don't have like the prosthetics for it or whatever it is, but it's so well directed. What they show, what they don't show, how quickly they cut to the chase. It's such an amazing runtime. I think it's an hour and 23 minutes. Like there's barely any horror films in history that wouldn't benefit from being trimmed down to an hour and 23 minutes. There's absolutely no fucking around in this movie. And yeah, it's a masterpiece. I mean, it really is. For me to watch it now, what is it, 50 years after its release to the year, 50 years old, and it's one of the scariest films I've seen this month. And I'm watching 30 horror films this month. I mean, it's truly one of, if not the scariest film. It might be the scariest film. It's 50 years old. That is, that's a huge achievement. And I think, is it Toby Hooper? Is that the name? Or Toby Hopper? I forget the name of the director, but he directed Poltergeist, which is, I think people often say that Spielberg kind of directed that movie and he would, you know, kind of ghost directed or whatever. And that it's more of a Spielbergian thing, but it is still pretty aggressive in terms of like how much they fuck over that house and that family. But it is more of a Spielbergian flair to it. But I don't know how much else he's directed. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some hidden gems in his catalog. I'm not really familiar with it, but there's some really strong choices in this. Even in terms of camera work, I guess I had it in my head as like, this was going to be just the trashiest fucking low grade movie ever. And it just, they had some almost like accidental magic to it, but it's actually really controlled. That first encounter with Leatherface where the guy goes in, he gets dispatched of like within a fucking heartbeat. There's no messing around there. And then it immediately cuts to the girl outside, still on the swing that she's been sat on previously. But now we're at this low camera angle, beautiful shot tracking her walking up to the house. But suddenly now we're seeing the house from like a really low angle. So it's looming and it's scary and it's intense. She doesn't know this because she's just walking towards the house. But the fact that they show two walks to the house, the guy first where we don't have any reason to think there's much of a threat, then the girl, and it's shot so differently. And then all of the bits that are more arty, like when I think it's that same girl ends up kind of on the floor in that room that's full of like feathers and bones and stuff like that. And it's just like cutting to all these different angles with these different noises is so artistic and so chaotic and so horrific. Or when the final girl is screaming and crying later on when she's at that dinner table, again, just all those extreme shots of her eyes and her mouth and everything like that. For the film to find these rhythms of going from like really normal conventional sort of invisible cinematography and editing to really stylized at all of these crescendo moments is brilliant. There's bits where someone gets killed and there's no music, there's no sting, there's no like over egging it. It's just like, I think the first kill is that way, if I remember correctly, where it's just like Leatherface comes out, smack him in the head with a hammer, grab him, and it's just like done. This is a non-event for Leatherface to do, so we're making it a non-event for me. And then when it cuts away from that, then we get music, because they understand how like devastating it is for something like that to happen with no music. But then when we go to the next character going to the house, it's like, now it's music, because now you're scared. And the use of silence and music and sound design, the opening bit where we're seeing all these like photographs, there's like I guess it's like the crime scene type photographs or whatever, that sound effect they use every time the flash bulb goes off is amazing. It's like legendary, one of the best pieces of sound design ever. So it's got so much technical tricks up its sleeve for it to be a debut film and like a low budget, trashy horror film. It's really, really impressive. And it kind of, I understand now why it's made such an impression and why it's so acclaimed. It's always sat a bit weird for me with seeing it up there at the top. You've got like The Shining and Psycho and stuff, which are made by, you know, two of the best directors of all time. Jaws, which I always struggle with as being a horror film, because you know, just from me, from what I like from a horror film, it just doesn't have the experience of a horror film for me. But I guess it is a horror film. Those three are made by three of the most iconic and acclaimed directors of all time. And then in the midst of it, there's this like movie, it almost feels like it's in the realm of like a porn movie or something. Like just a no budget 70s trashy, ugly kind of thing. And clearly I was just too young to appreciate it at the time, because watching it now, it absolutely deserves its place. I was reminded of Scream as well. Not that the film is anything like Scream, but they're both masterpieces of horror. So not just like The Shining, which is a masterpiece of cinema, but specifically masterpieces of horror, where they have such a deft understanding of how, on a filmmaking level, you can craft a arresting, terrifying, scary experience. So they're both kind of like, if we're teaching a class on horror, you're studying horror, they're like two of the best movies you could watch, I think. And then there's other movies like Get Out and stuff, which you could watch more from an understanding of film and cinema, but they're less specifically, this is a masterpiece of how you make horror itself. So yeah, anyway, had a really, really good time with it, as you can tell. Do want to check out if this director has made films that are maybe less iconic, but are, you know, also really amazing. I think weirdly, because I know Gunnar Hansen, who plays Leatherface, then went on to play Leatherface several times, and he's now kind of like Robert Englund. He's one of these horror icons. And I've always thought, okay, well, that's just because he happened to be the guy behind the mask. But his performance is amazing, which is weird to say, because if you go, Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood is an amazing performance. That tracks on all of our understanding of what acting is. But if you say Gunnar Hansen in Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an amazing performance, that it's harder to intuit why that would be, because it's like, well, you can't even see him, and all he doesn't even speak, he's just running around chasing people. But his squealing and his movements and the way he runs and the way he turns his head and everything is one of the best iterations I've seen of a masked killer. And I think it's the specificity of how he plays that part that makes this film as scary as it is. The final, even like she's running away from him at the end, and it's just such a chaotic ending of the other guy stopping in the truck and this and that. And then obviously the final iconic shot of him flailing around. it's such a well-realized character, yet we know very little about him. So yeah, masterpiece movie. Don't particularly feel drawn in to watch the sequels. I know there's a lot of sequels and remakes. I think I've seen one or two. The guys who made Inside, I after that movie completely blew me away and became my favorite horror film of all time. I sort of started diligently watching all of their other films as they came out, and almost without fail, they're pretty bad movies. But one of them is a Leatherface movie from about 5 years back or so, which was really bad. And I think that's the only other one I've seen. But the concept, as much as it's genius, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just like, what more do you want? That being done badly is so unappealing because it's not like, you got no cozy fun to fall back on like you do with like a teen slasher, like Urban Legend or something like that. This is like just dirty, smelly, sweaty, creepy old shit. Like it's if I'm watching a movie that's not scary and not good and it's set in this world, that's an uncomfortable time. So I'm a little bit wary of exploring the franchise more, although I will check if one or more of them is highly regarded, and if it is, then I'll hit it up. So yeah, let me know if you get a chance to check this movie out. Maybe you've already seen it, but if you haven't seen it, yeah, let me know what you think.
Hey man, just after watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre again there, probably been much longer since I actually seen it than I remembered, because I actually didn't remember many things about this at all, other than Leatherface and the door. And I watched this on my 65-inch TV screen with surround sound. So I had an amazing experience with this movie in terms of setup and indeed just pure entertainment and terror. Yeah, this movie is terrifying. It had me in a way that probably no other movie came close to in my tag along for this Spooktober Fest 2024 extravaganza. I feel like this movie, and I mean this as a compliment, so bear with me. I feel like this movie is what's wrong with horror. And by that I mean every movie, especially a slasher movie, every movie where someone's running away, is trying to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's trying to get us the thrill of Leatherface chasing after the protagonist. It's trying to get us to moments of characters discovering the lair of the killer or the monster. It's trying to get us to see where the fucked upness of the killer come from with his family. It's trying to get people from out of town in unfamiliar surroundings to come across these people. It's trying to give us all of these moments that Texas Chainsaw Massacre managed to give us organically, and it seems like this movie has recontextualized so much of what I don't like about horror movies and slashers. And I say that as a fan of slashers. Probably my most easy to watch horror movie genre. But there's so many situations in these movies, which you touched on as well, where we get, oh, why did you do that? Why hasn't the killer caught up with the person yet? This has been really drawn out. It's just everything that I dislike about horror is trying to get us to the moments that we love about horror, and that Texas Chainsaw Massacre manages to do so fantastically. Like you said, this movie doesn't miss a fucking beat. It's 123 minutes. It does not fuck around. And the brevity in which things happen in this movie is shocking. And I love what you said. This is very much a jump scare without the jump scare. It's if every cat meowing as a false alarm was the killer, and then you're done. Yeah, fantastic stuff. And just in a way, it's probably the most logical horror film of all time. If you just think about the sequence of events that we have here. So early on in the movie, the very beginning, when we get the type of news story report that it's found footage almost without it being found footage, where we get that text to begin with saying what happened, and then that's interfused with a news story that mentions something about there's a reason why there's a lack of oil or something like that, a lack of petrol. If you're paying attention, it's just background noise. So what we have is these teenagers, they're trying to find the grandfather's house where they used to spend the summer or whatever. They stop at a petrol station and they run out of petrol. There's no petrol in that station. They decide to go back to the other station. They stop off at the house. Someone goes missing. Or they go to the creek where the water well was. They hear something that signifies they might be able to get petrol, go to the house, come across something crazy, get killed. The girl then sees, actually, you know what happened? Yeah, so the guy goes and gets killed first, then the other girl gets killed, then people go looking for people, as you logically would, and they've taken the keys, but they've taken the keys in a way, oh, he probably left it in his pocket. And then it's just so logical, and that's part of what's scary about it. And you know what's really scary about this movie as well, which is something that a lot of horror movies don't do. Leatherface did not come looking for them. They just stumbled upon this. They just stumbled upon this killer. And I like the framework early on in the film where we get the slaughterhouse talking and the slaughterhouse analogy, where they're talking about, is it better for the cows to be killed this way? And you kind of get the impression, especially when you see Leatherface's domain, that he doesn't mind who he does it to, animal or person. I feel like he doesn't discriminate who he tortures or who he chops up, and maybe this is exposed a lot more in future movies. I don't know, but let's just take it on this one. I just feel like it doesn't matter what you are, he's going to treat you whether you're a cow or a human being. So that early framework is very good at contextualizing the prey, if you will, in this movie. Another thing about this movie that is really terrifying, a lot of it is set during daytime, and you grew up in Ireland, I grew up in Ireland, we grew up in the countryside, more or less, in Ireland. Have you ever been walking through the countryside and it's a hot day during the summer, and you just come across these semi-abandoned houses or semi-abandoned barns where you don't really know if someone's using them anymore, and you just happened to come across them, and it's a hot sunny day and it's got that smell of the machinery and things like that. Well, just the way they stumble upon this crazy guy in this is startling. And in broad daylight, just another sunny afternoon, you could be 2 houses down, sunbathing, having a good time, but there's this evilness lurking just under your doorstep. It's not a dark day, it's not cloudy, it's just the perfect conditions for a day, but there's something else sinister going on not far from where you are, and you might run into it, or you might. And that's really good. And I also like the fact that when they're at the gas station, the granddad who chooses to, well, sorry, not chooses, who's part of that fucked up family, I like the way he's, and this is what happens again in later movies, where that character would lead them into a trap. But I like the way this character is like, well, you sure you want to go up there? I don't know if you really want to go over there, you know? He's a bit reluctant to send them there because he's thinking, I mean, there is a chance they'll come across Leatherface and they'll die horribly. There's a chance that they won't, but I really don't want to have to deal with that shit. That shit that he eventually has to deal with. And I found that character very interesting as well because he's almost conflicted. He says he doesn't enjoy it, but he likes poking people with sticks. He's almost like that kid who's next to the kid that wants to burn down the house. And he's like, oh, I don't know if we should do this. But at the same time, wants it to burn down. His performance is very good. And yeah, the kills are crazy effective in this. And Leatherface is the most clinical killer in all of horror, probably. And I think that's what makes him scary. Because, you know, if Leatherface shows up on screen, he's not going to fall over and stumble over. If Leatherface shows up, you're fucking dead. It's almost like the Terminator. He's probably even more effective than the Terminator in the first movie. Probably. I don't know. Maybe not. I have to think. But it's that type of thing where you show up, you get a malice in the head. You show up, you get chainsawed. you ain't gonna really survive an encounter with him. And when we see the girl going into the house initially, not the final girl, but the other girl, she goes into the house, and like you said, we get that great scene of the carcasses of animal and human as well. So it makes it kind of disorientating. You mentioned this an arty scene, but one of the main things that's really good about that is it takes the time to show us carcasses of all types of species and what's going through her head. She's in a panic, trying to work out what the hell is going on, and you're probably thinking, is that a human? Fucking bones and shit. But at the same time, well, that's a bird bone. Maybe I'm freaking out, and it's brilliantly realized. And like you mentioned, that scene with the guy in the wheelchair, Franklin, where you think, because he's got more of a build up as a character, and nowadays there'd be a little more flesh out of that character, no pun intended, because that chainsaw scene, man. You'd kind of expect him to get more of a arc in a smaller way, and he just gets pushed through the dark when it does get dark, and he just gets absolutely mauled by Leatherface. And at this point, we get this great chase sequence between the final girl and Leatherface. And you know what's crazy? So first of all, with the generator, the sound of the generator going, it really foreshadows the chainsaw. And obviously, we've got Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the title, so you're already expecting. So the movie gives us that false chainsaw sound as well, which is really good. But when the chainsaw does go off, it has this great thing where she is screaming hysterically, right? And if you're watching a modern movie, you'd be like, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up. Why doesn't she shut the fuck up? She's making noise. But in this, she's screaming because she's hearing the chainsaw behind her, and it's like, she's like, and she constantly screams, and it really works. The level of hystericalness that she has, because the chainsaw is hysterical. The chainsaw is almost hysterical in itself as well. So the victim perpetrator dynamic in that chase sequence works so well from a sound design point of view that it does that thing that a girl running away, jumping over hurdles, that they do in modern movies. It manages to achieve it just through the sound, her running away, the sound getting closer. it's it's tough. It is tough. And my cat just did an Olympic jump there in front of me. So yeah, and then when she runs, and then we see her running, and I'm thinking, oh, there's another house here. I wonder how they're going to get involved. And it's actually Leatherface's house from another angle. I think it's the back of the house, and then she goes around to the front of the house, and you're thinking, oh, fuck, that is Leatherface's house. Oh, shit. And then when she runs upstairs, and then we see the granddad and the grandmother, who I presumed were dead. Turns out another great twist. The granddad is actually alive, but then she jumps out the window to begin with, and that's good. That is a good scene where she just smashes through the window and continues going, and she's staggering. Very good stuff. And then obviously she eventually gets captured, and then the brother is saying, oh, bring down granddad, and I'm thinking, oh, he's going to bring down a corpse. No, granddad is very much alive, and the original OG killer, as it turns out, where he turns out he was a great killer. And then we get that crazy dinner scene. I feel like Hannibal, it got a bit from this, and obviously the movie X got a lot from the opening of this as well, with the students. Well, maybe they're not students, the people going to shoot that porn movie. So that's probably why it feels like a porn movie for you, because X aped this aesthetic and they were shooting a porno in that movie. So very influential in many ways. When we get that dinner scene, like you mentioned, it is really frightening. And at this point, she's saying, you can make it stop. She's not even saying, let me go. And then that father character gives a fantastic performance. And obviously we saw the brother early on in the hitchhike scene, and the brother is a complete psycho, but there was something sympathetic about him, and very, not to say goofy, that's the wrong word, but there was something tragic about him. And there is something tragic about him until he meets up with Leatherface, and it's almost like Leatherface gives him confidence. And at this point, he starts saying that to the dad, you're only the cook. And then the dad has a very conflicted portrayal where he's seems to be very much enjoying it, but thinking he shouldn't, as I said before. And we get this great scene where she escapes, and again, the hitchhiker brother, he catches up to her, but it kind of makes sense that he doesn't grab her, because he's almost enjoying it, and he's floating around her like a butterfly, and he does stab her a few times, but it's more, he thinks this is fun, and he doesn't want this fun to end, and it's already established that he's finding it fun, because that's how we find out that the dad seemingly doesn't enjoy it. And again, Leatherface in the background getting closer with the chainsaw, and then it spills out onto a road. And again, this is where movies now try and get this feeling and try and get this manic exhilaration that a getaway chase scene would have. And the way this horror movie just stumbles onto a highway or a road or whatever, and guy runs over the hitchhiker brother with a truck, flattens him, and he's trying to get the girl inside, and then they go out the side door because they can't start, and it just seems, again, logical is the word, and they're running away, and it just feels so, it's odd to say, but so real of what you would do without the fancy moves and fancy camera angles, and he just fucks a wrench at Leatherface, and Leatherface falls over, and then he's off that way, the truck driver. You don't see him again, and then you see the girl run back the other way, get into the back of the car, as in the trailer, and just drives away and screaming manically, and then screaming happily. And yeah, there's so much in this movie, and I'm glad I did take the time to rewatch it. And yeah, I would also be interested to see what this director has done besides the ones we know about. And in fact, I've not seen Poltergeist. It's always been on my list ever since I was a kid. And just looking at his other movies they don't seem to have really set the world alight, but this is a very strong directorial effort, that's for sure. Oh yeah, and I also agree that it should definitely be on the top 10 of any horror list. I'm not an expert, as you know, but it really deserves to be up there and up there high. I also agree that I wouldn't put Jaws on a horror list, but friend of the show, Robbie Banvich, recently made a horror list, and he put Jurassic Park on his top 100 horror movies of all time. So it seems there is that niche for different type of horrors, I guess, that you wouldn't expect. But this is the blueprint for every modern slasher movie. I could be wrong about that in terms of there might be loads of stuff before this, but you'd know better than me. But it's a masterpiece, as you said.
Yeah, I guess for me, Jurassic Park is much more of a horror film than Jaws, because Jurassic Park is like the classic of nice, good vibes, beginning, no threat, everybody's happy, everything's going to be okay. Then the shit hits the fan at the end of Act 1. And then from then on, they're just afraid consistently for the whole movie. So it has that horror pacing, whereas Jaws, most characters in the film, other than the like main heroes, are like just having a kick-ass summer for the whole movie. And it's so much, it's not like you're getting more of a like a small town drama type thing. Anyway, I'm not going to try and stand my ground and be like, it's not a horror film. It's like Jaws is considered one of the most iconic horror films of all time, but it's just not my type of horror film. So, and this film, yeah, I agree with the ranking of it. I always assumed that it was placed that high in the rankings because of its importance, what it had done, you know, how influential it had been and how amazing it had been when it was released, rather than how much it held up now. But watching it now, I'm like, no, this really holds up. I can't even imagine how scary it must have been when it was released, because Jesus Christ, people watching this after they've been seeing like the horror films of the 60s and stuff like that, like not to slag off like older horror movies, but this is terrifying by today's standards. And I'm so glad that you've had that experience with it. I'm glad that you checked it out, because I know you were a little unsure about whether you're going to find the time to get to it. So yeah, really glad you did. Just making a cup of tea and a slice of pie here for my little afternoon snack. So I'm just going to finish that up and then send you another voice note in a sec. Okay, I'm settled down back at my desk now. Just going to go over some of the points you raised. Yeah, really glad you checked this movie out. And I'm glad that you had a similar experience that I had. It is a terrifying film. It just holds up so well. I love what you said about every slasher is trying to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Of course, there were elements to the slasher type of film that were added after this. I'm pretty sure Halloween comes after this. I think that's 79 or 78 or something. And like also Black Christmas, those films are often cited as being the beginning point of the modern slasher. But it's weird how little credit Texas Chainsaw Massacre gets. I think maybe because it's not a knife and it's not like there's what we then got of the Halloween style long drawn out stalking scenes and stuff. That became the mode. But so much of what's potent about about slasher films is here. I mean, I don't know if it technically qualifies as slasher films just on a sort of technicality, but it is it's doing right so much that slasher films get wrong. You mentioned the fact that we're both in the Irish countryside. We remember walking through fields, out gallivanting. You're a kid that you stumble upon some site, a house, a factory, a farm, a barn, some either abandoned or seldom used location, and you don't really know what to make of it. You don't know whose domain you're in. You don't know. I mean, you're a kid, so you're a bit fantastical in your imagination, but you're kind of like, is there a threat level here? Are they good people? Are they here right now and I can't see them? Are they round the back of that, or has no one been here in 15 years? And just having that fuzziness that you get in the countryside about where you are and what's up is something that we can relate to very strongly, and sort of utilizing that within a film, I think is great, because when they arrive, as you said, the film is incredibly logical. I mean, I can't really fault a single thing that happens in this film. If you wanted to be super critical, you could maybe say it's a bit of a coincidence that they pick up the hitchhiker and he's involved with the family, but I don't think that's too big of a coincidence. They're literally driving from the graveyard where their grandfather was buried to the house where he lived. It's a local area, and it makes sense for them to be doing that drive, and it makes sense for the brother to be doing that walk because for plot reasons that are revealed later on. So it's just that's the most cinematic thing. Everything else is just like exactly what would happen. Like a bunch of young people get into that area, they know that there's a pool that they can swim in nearby. Logically, they go to it. They're out of gas and they notice that there's a generator on. They can hear it. Let's go check it out. Maybe we can get some gas from them, pay them back. Whatever. It's not like a weird thing to investigate. I guess you could say, why does he go into the house? Would he go that far? But it's, for the most part, but blow by blow, he would have his keys in his pocket probably. The people, when those guys go missing for hours, the final girl and her brother, they'd be worried, they'd be concerned, but they wouldn't think there's some sort of killer on the loose or something. They'd go investigate, they'd go follow, and it's just beat by beat. It all makes total sense. No one is ever given the opportunity to do something that massively steps outside of what you would do. Like, when we don't get Leatherface stalking them and doing all like, why doesn't he just kill them type of questions that are normally arisen from this kind of movie. The people at the end, like the truck driver and the guy who comes along the pickup truck, like they all behave so exactly how you would in that situation, or how people would. And that's a huge part of why the film works for me. And when as you said, like Leatherface isn't out walking from house to house hunting people down. They enter his domain. When they arrive, stuff's going on. There's a generator on. Leatherface is chopping up meat. They're just living their life. They're doing their thing. And it's not like these people could only exist as horror killers. Like, you can't imagine Michael Myers from Halloween on days where he's not killing people and he's just making a sandwich or something. That doesn't track. Whereas this family and the way they're living their life seems so believable. As rare as it might be, it seems like, yeah, in an environment of complete, total and utter economic collapse, no education, just remoteness, left to your own devices, whatever sort of perversions you have could just continue to propagate for decades and generations. So and you would be living some sort of weird functional little life there, and then someone stumbles in, you just, you do your thing to put you in Leatherface's shoes. I love the hysteria in this film. I love the fact that the final girl and like any character in this film, they never have to maintain like a sort of cool sex appeal type thing. They go fucking crazy. Like once they're under attack and they're being killed essentially, or like they've seen horrors of like they've literally had a mental breakdown. They're completely hysterical and twitching and eyes moving around and stuff like that, and they're basically just like a survival engine or a fear engine, and that adds so much value to the film. And also like the sound of the generator, as you said, it kind of foreshadows the chainsaw, but the sounds in this movie, like there's a few sound effects in this film that are famous, but even if you go beyond that, just the general fucking cacophony of sounds that actually make sense, like the generator, it makes sense that they have a generator, and there's just always a horrible din of aggressive sound effects. When you go somewhere, like you go to a big factory or something, or you go by a construction site or something, you're like, that sound isn't targeted at me in a violent way. That sound isn't trying to hurt me, but it's the tone of it, just naturally, not deliberately, is so aggressive and horrible and almost angry that it's just unpleasant to be around. So setting a horror film in an environment which just naturally has a lot of that going on works really well. And I like what you said about there being something sympathetic about the brother. Obviously, he's got that big birthmark in his face and he seems like a simpleton, and he seems to, they're kind of the cool city kids who are like, not born with a silver spoon in their mouth necessarily, but they're definitely from a privileged position compared to him. And they're facing up, they're interacting with this guy, and it's like, he just wants to impress them. Right now, he is a fucking psycho, and he's like just slicing up your man's arm eventually. But there is a thing of like, this person isn't necessarily stepping in with the agenda of being like hurting them. He maybe just wants to connect with them, and then they won't buy his photo, which is completely reasonable. Why would they buy the photo? But his little money making scheme didn't work or whatever, and this guy's dirt fucking poor, and he's noticed that these people are wealthy, and it feels like there's so many times in this movie where there's motivations more complex than just I am killer, therefore I kill, right? Which is what we get in Halloween. In this one, it's more like, I'm living my life. Like, you came along. We're fucked up and we're messy, and you have got in amongst this. And like in the case of Leatherface seems like he's almost like his version of a nice person in a way. Like, he's that scenario's version of a nice person. From his perspective, these are just meat. These people, like they are to just be caught, contained, like chopped up, eaten. He's not a sadist. I don't get that impression anyway. He is he's, we can only speculate on his mental state, but he definitely doesn't seem to be like high on the food chain in terms of that household, right? He seems to be, everyone's hitting him and slapping him, and he's shrieking. I don't know, can he talk? And there's a real childlike innocence to him almost, which is terrifying as well, because he is a huge, looming, physically scary motherfucker, holding, like waving a chainsaw around, trying to kill you. But combining those together, and the granddad father, you know, maybe stone cold killer, but like he's ancient. He can barely hold a hammer, and so every character in this movie, except for the dad character, but again, like you said, when they first meet him, he does seem to have a bit of like, just don't go up to that house, right? He's like, I'll kill you if it comes down to it. If that's what we're doing, that's what we're doing. But he's not trying to engineer it and from the offset, which is interesting. So all four of those characters in the family have like some sort of weird complexity, and it's not like flashback to when Leatherface lost his mother and he just wanted to be a good person. Like that is the opposite of what this film does. What this film does is just preserve like this nice ambiguity and sadness, and it's not, you don't have time to be sad because they're killing you straight away, but it feels real. Michael Myers does not feel real, and I like Halloween a fair bit, and I've had some good times here and there with sequels, but there is something about this family here that is just particularly fucking eerie, and it's not just like, here's a scary mask type of thing. So yeah, really like the movie. Have thought about it a lot in the days since, and yeah, glad you had an equally good time with it. Just looking at some of these horror films of the era to kind of get a sense of what people would have been used to seeing. So I've looked at 1973 to 1975, so sort of a 3-year span that Chainsaw falls in the middle of. And there's some like incredibly famous, super iconic horror films in there. Some regarded as the scariest horror films of all time. So it's definitely not like selectively pulling some forgotten movies. Just here on IMDb, sorting by popularity, we got Rocky Horror Picture Show, which I don't really count as a horror. The Exorcist, which is maybe the most notorious talked about horror film of all time, and one of the most celebrated critically. I guess I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is 1,000 times scarier than The Exorcist. I think Exorcist offers very little scares, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre is terrifying. The difference is I'm not religious, and all things like possession and the devil and all that doesn't get under my skin at all. So I'm left with just like the imagery of the girl, messed up face, crawling backwards down the stairs, all that stuff. There's good stuff in The Exorcist. I like it, but yeah, just doesn't come close in terms of scares for me. The Wicker Man, again, like the movie quite a lot, don't find it scary. Certainly not on the level. It's more the ideas of it are a bit creepy, but it's a fun movie. I like it. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is fucking terrifying by comparison. Don't Look Now, really scary imagery with the little girl running around, the red jacket and all that, and then the old woman face and stuff. But again, I think if I was used to seeing that, now it depends maybe on how your mind works and stuff, because some of these, they play on very different fears, societal fears. So Texas Chainsaw just jives with me. Then next one is Black Christmas, which is more in the Texas Chainsaw thing. It's like there's a human killer out. I love Black Christmas. I don't think it's remotely as scary as Chainsaw. A little bit lower down the list, we got Deep Red, which I really like as a movie, and I think it is quite scary. But again, I think it is completely subjective what scares you. It's kind of like what you find funny. And there's a lot of things that are like ideas based. Let's take Wicker Man, for example. What about if you get there and everyone's just working together and it's a cult and it's all, it's hippies and it's, there's no one you can turn to because everyone is teaming up on you, whatever. Like, what I find ideas way less scary than the immediacy of someone coming to get you. It's not an idea that could eventually kill you. It's a person with a chainsaw that's like half a meter away from you. So I get that it's very subjective, but like for people like me who presumably existed in 1974, going from these movies that I've mentioned into Chainsaw must have just been an absolute sledgehammer to the head, to put it aptly.
Yeah, man.
just had another thought there listening to your voice note about, and it ties into something else you said before. It's about the family themselves. We don't necessarily get a backstory, which would be terrible. We don't need a backstory, but we get enough in their physicalities to build our own scenario, I guess, and just feel something in addition to how violent they are. I guess that's the best way of putting it. And you mentioned, which I forgot to reply to, that the person who plays Leatherface, it is a fantastic performance. And it's a fantastic physical performance. It's almost like the Buster Keaton of horror movies or something. And I don't mean that he's slipping all over the place, but I just mean in a pure physical tour de force, it's perfect, isn't it? Even how he runs and how he lumbers to maneuver, I guess is the word. It just adds so much to it. And you just reminded me of another thing and it kind of clicked with me now. We get that conversation where they're talking about how they use this method to kill the cows quicker because it's not as cruel for the cow. I think it's the brother that tells that story. Or at least this interaction between the guy in the wheelchair and Leatherface's brother. And it could be argued that Leatherface kills quickly for the same reason. The way he just, bam, hits him on the head. And there's a scene where I think it's when he kills the guy with the glasses, where he kind of has a mini breakdown himself, where he's really disturbed by something. And you don't really know what. And those are great character details. Almost of the silent film kind, in a way. And I think it's because the guy with the glasses opened the fridge and we saw the woman. I don't know if she was still alive at that stage or just looked very eerie, but for the film to take the time to have Leatherface and the actor, his name escapes me right now, you said it earlier, to give that level of complexity to something through mannerisms. We don't need a backstory, like you said. It just adds so much to the character of Leatherface. And just to go by the movies there that you went through, I saw The Exorcist maybe when I was 19, 20. I found it scary in an anxiety kind of way. Haven't seen Black Christmas, The Wicker Man, or I think some red one that you said. Haven't seen any of those. But I do know that watching this movie in 2024, it's, if you're used to a certain type of modern, polished type of slasher movie now, this movie takes you so much by surprise. It probably hit modern audiences really hard as well. So yeah, glad I got to watch it.
Yeah, you're right. Compared to the polished stuff we get now, like I recently in this month watched the 2008 remake of The Hitcher, and you could argue that they're kind of equivalent aesthetics for the 2000s and the 70s in terms of they're both set like off dusty highways, sweaty, like remote countryside, rusty old buildings. Like they have a lot of in common, but like the 2000s one is trying to keep everything sexy and cool and like these like really stylish color filter on and musical sequences that have like 9 Inch Nails and stuff like that. And you know, there's some of that is not bad, but the uncomfortable factor that you get from the original presentation here in the 70s is you know, significant. I like what you're saying there about Gunnar Hansen, his performance, and him just being disturbed and, him being put off by the guy opening the freezer. And it feels like he is just going about his work and he doesn't necessarily like his work. He doesn't enjoy this. He doesn't like doing it. It has to be done. It's like farming to him. It's like, plowing the fields or something. Like, he has to go about it efficiently and effectively. And people messing with his work is really frustrating to him. I would use the word frustrating before I'd use the word angering. We don't feel like we see much in the way of anger. At the end, when he's in his most scary, in a way, flailing about with the chainsaw against the sunset or sunrise, it's still, he's overwhelmed and he's frustrated. And you put it very well there, where you said what these characters have is something on a character level in addition to the violence. So it's not like sympathetic in the way of like they're violent, but they've been hurt or something like that. If that's the really reductive, sort of cliched thing that we get a million times, we've had it a million times over. This is more like give them some character, give them something that, I don't know, that just makes them feel more realized, more of a person. And this isn't Glengarry Glen Ross. They're not going into massive big monologues which tell you every single thing on their mind or all their worldview and history of their life and stuff like that. It's just a little bit of texture in there that makes these characters much more scary. So they strike a really nice balance between the faceless, shape-like killer, cipher, almost like unknowable, completely mysterious, just representing the pure unknown, and a fully realized character baddie like Kathy Bates in Misery or something. They're kind of like halfway between those two extremes. So yeah, another reason why I think this film has worked for us. I love that I've had this update to it. I'm so glad that I updated my thoughts on the film after watching it so many years ago and not thinking much of it and kind of carrying that opinion for years of like, yeah, it's all right. It's like, it's got some good stuff for its time. It was important to now watch it again and be like, man, this fucking kills as a horror movie. It's just so good. I won't be watching it again for a long time because I really want to preserve this feeling that I have with it and this experience of it. But it'll definitely be a film that comes to mind a lot more as I watch horror films now. And I'm thinking like, yeah, you saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre, either someone making a film in, the late 70s where it feels like it's a direct, immediate reaction to the arrival of Chainsaw, or it's a film from the 2020s where it's like, yeah, you wanted to get back to that, like X, which you referenced. So yeah, phenomenal movie, and definitely up there. I think for me, like just without doing any kind of math on this or doing a ranking, I would suspect it's now probably in my top sort of 30 horror films of all time. So yeah, really, really liked it.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.